welcome to Overtime Hockey Talk. This is a special edition, an off-season report of the Vancouver Canucks and the Arizona Coyotes. We come to you with this episode with the knowledge, the fact that Justin will be married by the end of the week. That is crazy.
It's a beautiful thing.
That is crazy. It's finally going to happen. This is what, the sixth time that you guys have tried to set a date?
Damn, I mean, it feels like it, right?
It does.
Yeah, we're going on date number 4 officially, but
you guys have only been on 4 dates and you're getting married?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's going to be a lot of fun. I've been working on my speech, so I'm ready to go.
I'm excited to hear it.
Okay, well, let's get to some hockey talk. The Vancouver Canucks had a very disappointing regular season, missing the playoffs, and I guess there was that little rush at the end there where if they had won like their last 8 games that were all postponed, they would have made the playoffs. But alas, it was not to be. The Vancouver Canucks were, I think they were kind of that team last year. If you listen to our show on the Ottawa Senators and the LA Kings, you can go back and subscribe and find that show. The Senators, I said, are going to be the team that everybody's saying, oh, this team's going to be the up-and-coming team. They're going to be great. They're going to make the playoffs. They're going to surprise everybody. And Vancouver, while they did make the playoffs last season, I think they surprised everybody by doing so. And I think that everybody kind of overrated them coming into this year. Not to mention all the COVID stuff, but defensively speaking, this team was just not as good. They did not get as good of goaltending as we thought that they would get after seeing what they were able to do in the playoffs, after signing Braden Holtby. I think we thought this year was going to go different.
Yeah, I mean, you looked at that division they were in, that Canadian division, and we thought, okay, yeah, Edmonton could contend. Obviously, Toronto was the cream of the crop there, but you figured playing Calgary, playing Ottawa, playing Montreal, these middling teams that potentially you could take advantage of and, get a few more points than maybe you deserved out of, maybe in another division. But yeah, it seemed to just show that, obviously Braden Holtby and Thatcher Demko both early on in the season struggled in goal. Demko managed to find his way, as the season progressed, but obviously too little too late. And then on the back end, right, we talked about the loss on D, and I mean, gosh, why? I mean, Chris Tanev, they let him go for, little to no money more than what they brought in, and it's like it clearly affected this team's identity on the back end, and it showed tremendously because it seemed like they couldn't stop teams from just, beating them up to, offensively all year long.
Yeah, and it's funny to me that this team, that what they did from a goaltending perspective in letting Jacob Markstrom walk. He signed $6 million for 6 years. They go and they grab Braden Holtby. They're paying him. I know Demko's making $5 million. I don't know. It seems like they let the guy go who they had. Man, it feels like Markstrom. It was always like, no, he's good. He's going to be good. He's going to be good. And then he's finally good. And they're like, yeah, we're going to let him go for the next guy who we think is going to be good. Like, it didn't make a lot of sense to me. They had put so much time and effort into making Markstrom who he was. And now here you are bringing in another goaltender. And I think that they probably could have kept both of them. They probably could have found a way. And instead they let him go. And I feel like the team was built around the way Jacob Markstrom played, and it just didn't work the same way. It took them a while. I think Demko will be okay, but I didn't love that move. Didn't love letting Tanev go. There were a lot of kind of those strange, like, hey, this guy is actually the glue in that area, and they're just letting these guys walk. And then in the forward position, it just felt like they were throwing anybody that they could at the wall to see what would take. And, this team just couldn't score goals. They just couldn't score goals. And with Elias Pettersson going down, they were bad.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, don't get me wrong. They still had, JT Miller still producing pretty well. Brock Besser was actually better than I thought he probably would have been this year, even with a healthy, Pettersson all year. I mean, he still managed to put up 23 goals and almost 50 points. But, still, the depth is where it really showed that it was affected. And you got, all these guys like Jimmy Vesey that you brought in to hope to try to fill in, some of that bottom six, and Jake Virtanen. And honestly, to me, it obviously didn't really pan out. And scoring goals was such a problem for this team. And when you struggle early on letting so many goals in, obviously you can't win games that way. And, long-term success is just not going to be there. And it, was obvious. And, don't get me wrong. A lot of teams couldn't survive without their top centerman, but I mean, you're a team that, obviously was competitive the year before. And I think they had enough leadership in that team where, they should have been able to at least hold on to things, but they were just too far behind from the get-go. There was no making it up at that point.
Yeah, I think the Vancouver Canucks need to do something here in the offseason. They're always busy in the UFA market. They're usually always looking to bring in people, and people want to live in Vancouver, so that's not really an issue. I think it's going to be a matter of like, hey, who can they bring in to be that second line center? Because at this point, you've got Elias Pettersson, and then after that, Brandon Sutter is a free agent, and he's not a second line center anyways. You're really missing a lot down the middle. And
well, I mean, Bo Horvat's going to be their second line guy, and I'm totally fine with him because he's going to be a 50 to 60 point guy. But the way he plays defensively, he's like the poor man's Patrice Bergeron, basically, in my mind. And he's the captain of that team. So I don't have a problem as far as their centerman goes. But when you go to their third line, right? Nothing. Fourth line, it's pretty bare.
Well, yeah, but then when one of those guys goes down, you don't even have it. There's nobody. Exactly. There's nobody to score. And then you go to the wing and you've got JT Miller and Brock Besser. And there's really not a whole lot else happening. I think Jake Virtanen, I think the ship has kind of sailed on whether, hey, is Jake Virtanen going to be good? No, he's not. He's not that good of a player. And is he worth keeping on your fourth line? Maybe. But he's no one of consequence really on the team. And then Tanner Pearson, he's not, he scored 10 goals in 51 games. He's not doing a ton, it's just, there's not these guys that are really going to scare you on the wing. And then if one player goes down, which inevitably one player will, there's nothing behind them.
Yeah. And that's the thing, right? Depth, right? That's where good teams are always successful because they can keep the ship afloat when guys go down, right? I mean, obviously when Sidney Crosby goes down, right, they've got Malkin to carry the load, or, vice versa. And they've obviously had pieces to plug in holes when guys go down. But on this Vancouver team, right, Pettersson goes down. Really, Bo Horvat, he's fine as a second line guy, but he can't fill in that hole as a top line centerman to really produce offensively and get this team scoring goals. And so, again, that's going to be the challenge this offseason because they've still got guys like Anton Roussel, Jake Virtanen, Tyler Mott. They've got guys on these deals that maybe are hindering them a little bit as far as cap situations go. And you could even throw Braden Holtby's name in that ring now too, because he's just, and Louis Eriksson, again, a guy who, maybe they buy him out this offseason, right, to kind of spread some of that money out. But, again, they've got issues at the cap. And basically, they're going to have $14 million, $14.9 million next season to work with. And they've got to re-sign Elias Pettersson. So you got to think at least half of that, if not more, is going to be tied up in him. And then, you've got to look at the back end, right? Alexander Edler, he's been a serviceable guy. Obviously, he's not going to get $6 million, but, really outside of Nate Schmidt and Tyler Myers, they have, and Quinn Hughes obviously is going to need money too. So there goes all your cap money. So what are you doing with this team? Because you've got to figure things out from a cap situation just to keep the guys you have on your roster there, let alone have to sign guys that can fill in those depth areas in your middle six to help you be competitive when guys go down.
Yeah, fortunately, a lot of those guys are, a lot of those numbers are beginning to go away. You know, you're like Luongo and his recapture. It only has 1 year left. That $3 million like that's a killer. You know, you're $3 million. There's a good player, especially if you can package that $3 million of Roussel and turn it into a $6 million player. I mean, that's a lot of money on the cap, especially when the cap's sitting still. But I do think that, you know, you could trade Antoine Roussel. You could deal a Jake Virtanen. There are some guys that they could afford to let go, and they would find themselves in a different position. I think that maybe you do try and trade Braden Holtby. He submits a 4-team no trade list, so you got 28 teams that he can go to. I'm sure you can find somebody who's willing to bring in Braden Holtby at $4.3 million for 1 year. So when I consider that, you know, there's one thing that I really want the Canucks to do. You want to hear what it is?
I would love to.
The Canucks, to me, like I said, they're missing that, like, they need somebody who can just come in and lead this team. Bo Horvat, great defensive forward. He does so many things right. He is the captain. He's a great little player. He hasn't done anything. I mean, he's played lots of regular season games, and that's fine. I'm sure he's a good guy. I want to bring in someone who's been there. He's gone on long playoff runs. He's been a captain for a long time, and he puts up big points. I want to find a way in a dream world here. I'm sure that that Colorado will do all they can to keep him. But Gabriel Landeskog is a UFA. And can you imagine, what if Vancouver give him $10 million a year?
If only they had the cap money to do so.
But they do. They can get the cap money. The cap money, to me, cap money, these teams can figure out. Plus, you can, in the offseason, remember, you can spend 10% more. So that means in the offseason that they have $24 million available. So now you just have to figure out, you know, what do you have to do to get rid of Louis Eriksson and that one last year of his deal? You know, can you find a team who will take a second round pick or something and take that? Can you find somebody to take the different, like a Jay Beagle or Antoine Roussel? Like there's players in here where you could dish off some money. Yeah. I want them to bring in Gabriel Landeskog. I think he'd be a great fit in Vancouver. I don't think he's going to leave Colorado, but if he was getting a boatload of money, you never know.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. It's a fantasy. It's great to think about those sort of things that you can make happen because, that would be an amazing addition for this team, and I think it would, add a little something that maybe this team misses, and that is leadership, right? But it's going to take over $10 million to get him to come away from Colorado and to go from a perennial Stanley Cup contender now to basically a team that might make the playoffs. That's going to take a lot of money to get him to move there. And Denver is Vancouver is too, is a really nice city. So, but for me, honestly, if you want to hear one move that I think might be good for this team as far as shedding some cap money, and could shake things up a little bit to say, hey, you know what? Because, listen, Vancouver went out today and they brought in 2 new coaches, got rid of 4 guys here. So I think they're trying to find ways to be creative to really shake things up on this team. But to me, I think if you want to shake things up and get rid of a big-name player, Tyler Myers is the guy I think you want to move. I think at 31 years old, $6 million, right-handed shot, he still has a good enough game where I think you're going to find a lot of teams that are willing to pay a good price for him. You can bring in some assets. You could even make a trade to bring in, again, more center depth or more scoring, guys on the wings, right? Because to me, I think Tyler Myers, when I watch his game, he's such a big defenseman and he doesn't use his body, and it drives me nuts. And I think there's so many situations where, maybe he uses physicality a little bit more. That would prevent some scoring opportunities, right? And I think at 6'8", 230 pounds, he has more than enough to go around, but he just doesn't do it. And I think, again, maybe because he is a little bit more of an offensively minded defenseman, maybe that's just not in his game anymore. But I think if you find a team that's willing to give you some good pieces in return, maybe you luck out and you find, a couple wingers that can play in your middle six there and provide you with some nice scoring depth, and you get a draft pick out of it. Who knows? I mean, but again, to me, if I want to shake things up, I think that's the move I make, and that's the piece that I send out.
Okay. One more realistic than Gabriel Landeskog is what about a Tyler Bozak? He could definitely stabilize that third line. He's somebody who can put up 30, even 40 points. He can score you close to 20 goals in a year if he's playing with the right guys. And you know what you're getting with Tyler Bozak. He's won a cup. He's been on some good teams. So Tyler Bozak might be a good fit to kind of come in there and stabilize that bottom six for Vancouver. And you'd probably get him pretty cheap. I don't think you'd have to pay him a ton to come there.
Now you did mention Colorado earlier, and one guy that I did think of that I don't think is going to re-sign in Colorado, who I think has been very, very good for them in the playoffs and who has cuffs to his name, and that's a Brandon Saad. I think would add some nice depth. And again, I don't think he's going to cost you $6 million either. So
no, I would wonder though if Brandon Saad would be, at this point in his career, he's won a bunch, so I guess you're probably going to go where you can get the most money. That's my guess.
Perhaps, yeah.
But I guess we'll see on that. We'll find out whenever Colorado is eliminated. Which, hey, technically it could be. You might already be listening to this and Colorado's eliminated. Yeah. Okay, Vancouver Canucks. Where does this team stand in your mind?
Yeah, I think just because we mentioned this on our last show with the LA Kings, I think because of the division they're in and the goaltending and I guess you could consider maybe the top 3 or 4 guys they have up front up forward, I think if they just add a few pieces as far as team status goes, I think they're maybe 2 years away from being a Stanley Cup, not a Stanley Cup, a playoff type contending team.
Yeah, and this is a playoff contending team, though, that they could make the playoffs next year and no one would be surprised. But I don't think that they're a team that's going to win the division, and be somebody who it's like there's no doubt this is a playoff team. I think they're kind of on that, like they're on the bubble, but the side of the bubble where you go, I don't know. I don't think so. Although a healthy Elias Pettersson really changes things. Okay, let's go Arizona Coyotes for our last team of the day. The Arizona Coyotes, after a pretty nice season during the bubble and a little playoff run kind of thing there, the Arizona Coyotes really struggled this year. And, at one point it looked like, hey, maybe they can make the playoffs. Then they didn't. And they were just kind of one of the 4 really bad teams in the bottom of that Honda West division. They, as per usual, not like the Anaheim Ducks, but they couldn't really score goals. They let in a good amount of goals, and they just don't continue to not have that depth up front. And headed into the offseason, let's talk UFAs. The Arizona Coyotes have Derek Brassard, Oliver Ekman, Alex Goligoski, Nicholas Hjalmarsson, Jason Demers, Jordan Osterley, and Antti Raanta as UFAs coming into this season. So there is a lot to do in Arizona.
Hey, you forgot Marian Hossa's name in there too, by the way.
I thought about it. I actually read an article in the Athletic yesterday about Marian Hossa. He has not played hockey in like 4 years. He has not, I think he went and he did something where he was helping coach I think. And he said, this is the first time I've actually picked up a hockey stick in 4 years. He's like, I don't know. He said he doesn't miss it, and he's happy doing what he's doing, and he considered coming back, and he just decided, nope, not worth it. I don't want to have to deal with this skin condition, so I'm just done.
Okay.
Yeah, so Marian Hossa, there you go. He will retire an Arizona Coyote. Maybe Chicago, maybe at the end of this deal, Chicago signs him to one of those one day things so that he can retire a Chicago Blackhawk.
Hey, there you go. How about the Red Wings just sign him to that?
Right. Yeah, after his 1 year with Detroit.
Right.
I mean, in reality, he should retire as an Atlanta Thrasher.
There you go.
I mean, for a guy who won 3 Stanley Cups, he played on a lot of teams before that. He was on Atlanta and Ottawa because he was dealt for Danny Heatley.
Yep.
And who else did he play? He played on then Pittsburgh and Detroit and then Chicago. Finally won his cups. And now the Arizona Coyotes, although he never wore their jersey. Okay, anyways, enough about Hossa. These UFAs have to be the story of Arizona's offseason because it's leaving them with a whopping $31 million to spend. Who's staying? Who's going? What are the Coyotes doing?
Yeah, first let's start in goal, right? I think Antti Raanta, he's gone. Obviously, you like Darcy Kemper. You've got him signed for 1 more year, and I think they're going to probably get him to another 3-year extension or something like that after this season, and maybe they figure out where the cap's going from there. But Aiden Hill, I think, is a quality backup, someone who, again, he had a good season this year, and I think there's no reason not to give him the opportunity to finally be a backup goaltender, at least a 1B in the NHL for this team. And so Antti Raanta, to me, he's got to go. I think, obviously, he's probably going to want a little bit too much money anyways. When you look at the back end, I think, Alex Goligoski, Nicholas Jarlmason, I think one of those guys probably sticks around. Goligoski, to me, might be the one that I would probably sign more than the other, just because I like his legs a little bit more. But, again,
he does have nice legs.
Yes. But again, I mean, you know what? Either one of these guys, not a bad signing. I like both of their veteran leadership, and they still have a little bit of, game left in them still. Jason Demers, again, I wouldn't be surprised if he's the one that re-signs either, because, again, he's still a quality guy. I was actually kind of shocked that either one of these 3 guys weren't dealt at the deadline for something, to be quite honest. Obviously,
Me too. What were they thinking?
Yeah, I mean, they weren't competing. They were pretty far off at that point. So, I don't know, a pipe dream, I suppose. But, and then up front, as far as forwards are concerned, honestly, you know what? All the UFAs, Bunting, Fashing, and Brassard, I don't see any one of these guys sticking around.
Yeah, who cares about those guys?
Yeah, exactly. So, really, it's all in the back end. And so, hey, I don't know. What are your thoughts? Do you think any one of those 3 big-name defensemen or Antti Raanta stick around?
No, definitely not Antti Raanta. I think that Hjalmarsson signed there as a free agent out of Chicago, if you remember. I believe, right? He didn't get traded there. Yeah, he was free agent. No, he did sign with the Chicago Blackhawks. Is that right? Am I just going crazy?
I think you're going crazy, but
yes,
No, you're right. He was traded there. Yep.
Yes, he signed with the Blackhawks and then he was traded. Yes.
Yep. I'm sorry.
So my guess is that the guy that they want to stay is probably Hjalmarsson. Okay. And maybe that's because he would come a little cheaper. I mean, he doesn't really put up a lot offensively. It's hard to look.
And
yes,
Jacob Chikrin to produce there. So,
and I think it's hard to put into numbers the way that Hjalmarsson has impacted this team. I mean, when they made that move, it was huge. It was kind of legitimized the Arizona Coyote defense at the time, and I think the influence that he's had on Jacob Chikrin, and just he's a very stabilizing force. I think that he might be somebody that you look to hang around. Goligoski, he does have the offensive upside to him that Hjalmarsson definitely doesn't have. Goligoski's probably a easy 30-point guy every year. I wonder if he would prefer to go somewhere where he could win at 35 years old. He's never. Well, I guess did he win with Pittsburgh?
He did win with Pittsburgh. No, actually he didn't. I'm sorry.
No, yes, no. He did. Oh no, yeah. He won with them the first time, right? Yeah, in 08.
No, he didn't play in the playoffs. So he'd only played 3 games.
09. He did win the cup. He did win the cup though. He played 2 playoff games.
Right.
In that year. So he wasn't really like in it. Yeah. So he might have a ring, but I could see, a guy like that saying, I want to go and make a run at it one more time. And this Arizona team isn't a team that's going to win the cup again. Hjalmarsson, he won his cups, and I think maybe he just, you enjoy the weather and you stick around. So that's the way that I'd go. On the forward position, the most interesting guy, maybe one of the more interesting forwards this offseason, is going to be Phil Kessel. Because Phil Kessel is a UFA at the end of the year. 1 year left on his deal, and boy, oh boy, if Phil Kessel gets dealt again and Arizona holds on to a little bit more of his salary, his salary's all over the league because the Leafs are still paying for him. I think they retained his salary when he got dealt to Pittsburgh, but Phil Kessel, he can, I think, put in the right situation. He's still going to score you a bunch. He scored 20 goals in the 56 games. He was on pace for almost 30 goals again this year. Had a bounce back year from kind of an ugly 19-20. Granted, that team just didn't score ever. It really, in my mind, hasn't totally worked out. I think maybe the way that Kessel was hoping in Arizona after getting dealt from Pittsburgh. He goes from, in Pittsburgh, a 70, 92, and 82 point season to 38 and 43 points. Now, some of that could be age. I think also it's just the playing style and the guys around him. I think Phil Kessel is going to want out, and he's going to go somewhere not anywhere where he's going to get a ton of attention. I think that it was fair to say that he didn't like all the attention in Toronto, so I don't think that he would go to a team like that. But there's one team that I'm eyeing for a Phil Kessel deal, and that's the Florida Panthers. I think Phil Kessel would happily go to the Florida Panthers. He'd still be in an area where he's not going to have a lot of external pressure, and he can enjoy the weather, and he would have some great players to play with. And the one thing that Florida lost that they didn't replace, and it showed when they played Tampa, they didn't replace Mike Hoffman. They did not have that winger that you could just at any point you get him the puck in the right spot and he can snap one home. And that's Phil Kessel. And I think if you played Kessel you'd reunite him with Patrick Hornqvist, who they had great success in Pittsburgh, I think that's a move that I would be looking to make if I were the Florida Panthers. Find out if Arizona and what they want. I think that Florida, like adding Phil Kessel to the Florida Panthers, suddenly I think you are legitimately going, this team might be a Stanley Cup contender.
Okay, yeah, I don't hate that move at all, because I will say, right, Phil Kessel to me, obviously, the first year in Arizona, I think it's just trying to adjust to a completely new system. He has absolutely nobody playing center for him. And then this year, right, he kind of figures things out a little bit, gets back to his game. But again, still no centerman, right, to pass him the puck. Obviously, he's got Nick Schmaltz and, Christian Dvorak, but these aren't elite top-line centers. These are guys who are best suited on the second and third line. So to me, I think if you put him in a situation like Florida, right, you can give him, maybe, a Sam Bennett or a Alexander Barkov to dish him the puck, and oh my gosh, he could potentially put back up 30, 35 goals again, because he's still got feet underneath him, and he's still got, a wicked wrist shot. So, hey, I mean, at $6.8 million next year, I think Florida would easily find a way to fit that in right now. And then maybe even long term, maybe he takes a little less money being, at the tail end of his career, to just say, hey, you know what, for 2 or 3 more seasons, I want to be able to compete, and hey, I'll go ahead and take a little less money, and no state tax either. So there you go. So now we can take less money.
Yeah, this team is kind of, I don't know what they're going to be, because also remember last year, Oliver Ekman-Larsson, there was a lot of talk about him getting dealt, and he said, once this point in the offseason hits, I will not allow myself to be dealt. So then he wasn't. Who's to say that stuff doesn't start coming up again? Like why wouldn't it? Why wouldn't it? So I give it probably 60% that he's in Arizona next year, but there's going to be a lot of chatter.
Yeah, and I think the big thing that kind of hinges on this is the fact that they're getting a new coach, right? So they've got a new coach. They're going to get a new system in place. So I think if OEL, comes back to camp and says, hey, you know what? I don't really like this guy. I don't like this guy. I don't like the direction he's bringing, the team's going in right now. At some point, does Bill Armstrong say, hey, we're going to blow things up and start a rebuild? And does he want to hang around for that? So, hey, I mean, if there's a time to leave, it's now, because you're probably going to get the most as far as value goes out of OEL. So maybe Bill Armstrong says, hey, you know what? We're starting the rebuild. You've been our captain, for these last few years. You're basically the face of this franchise, and we want to give you the opportunity to leave if you think that you don't want to stick around for this. And so, I'm kind of with you. I'm 50-50 at this point. I think there's a good chance he'll stay there, but at the same time, I think if he doesn't like the coach that comes in, if he thinks the system's wrong and that maybe they're going to start heading towards a rebuild, then maybe he says, you know what, I got to go somewhere where I can get a shot at a cup here.
Yeah, and I mean, he's such a fantastic defenseman. What about this deal? What about sending Oliver Ekman-Larsson and Phil Kessel to the Toronto Maple Leafs for and a first-round pick for Mitch Marner?
Oh my!
That's the I don't want the Leafs to trade Marner because I don't. He's so young. He hasn't even hit his peak yet. But that's the kind of deal being thrown around. Hey, what if we brought back Phil Kessel and you bring in Ekman-Larsson? Suddenly you've got this like a 4-pronged defense, and you lose Marner, but hey, you've got Phil Kessel, and now some younger guys can come up. Not the worst thing I've ever heard. Yeah,
you know what? I think if OEL is going to get moved, the one team I'd love to see him go to, I think more than any, would probably be the Winnipeg Jets. I think, obviously their priority is going to be getting a number 2 centerman in there, because obviously you saw it with Mark Scheifele being gone. They've really had a hard time producing offense. But the other one was, Neil Pionk and Josh Morrissey, right? That pairing was so good against McDavid and Draisaitl. And then when Pionk went down, they just had a hard time shutting down that top line, with Toffoli in them. And so I think, obviously they would love to find somebody else to solidify a second pairing for them. And, hey, you know what? OEL and Dylan DeMilo on the second pairing isn't so bad when you got Pionk and Morrissey on the top.
Yeah, maybe you cut your losses with Pierre-Luc Dubois and deal him for Ekman-Larsson.
Hey, there you go. Honestly, I think Arizona would welcome that, because, again, they badly need a top-line centerman.
Yeah. Now, I some of the reason that I think Vancouver let Chris Tanev go is because they thought they were going to get Oliver Ekman-Larsson.
Yeah.
And that didn't happen. Now, I wonder if the trade talks ramp back up, and that to me is probably a very likely team for Ekman-Larsson. Vancouver wants a top defenseman to go along with Quinn Hughes, and boy, that would be a top pairing, wouldn't it?
That would be really nice.
All right, well, that's the Vancouver Canucks. Justin, tell us where this team stands right now in your mind.
Oh, you mean the
Arizona Coyotes, yes.
To me, honestly, I think this team needs to go into full rebuild mode. I think they need to start selling off assets, right? We talked about it. Phil Kessel's got to go. OEL, I think, has to go. You've got to start selling off pieces here and get this rebuild going as soon as possible. New GM, new coach, get them in here, get the pieces. And I think maybe you can turn around with, some of these guys like Clayton Keller and Nick Schmaltz you have signed. You could probably turn this around in 4 years.
Okay. I like it. I think I agree. This team's really never been a contender, and they've almost had to just do their best to make the playoffs just so that they have fans. And I think that the real way to build this is to just be bad for a minute and build a real good team that can actually score. This team's not fun to watch.
Right.
Build a team that's fun to watch. And you can build a bad team that's fun to watch. Just be fun to watch at this point.
Yep.
I think you'll be in a good place. Okay, that is our show. You can find us on Twitter at OT Hockey Talk. Let us know what you think of the Vancouver Canucks and the Arizona Coyotes, what they'll do in the offseason, and we will talk to you soon.